Hi everyone and welcome to this video featuring everything you need to know about squishies. We'll be testing out loads of popular hacks, such as putting squishies in the fridge or freezer, or finding out which types of paint really work best for decorating them. I'll also show you the best tips for making slow rising and silicone textured squishies from scratch. Before we get started, a big thanks to Epic Games for sponsoring this video. They're the creators of Fortnite, which is a game I'm sure all of you have heard of by now. If you haven't played it yet, then be sure to click the link below to try it out. Fortnite is free to play on PC, Mac, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, iOS, and Android. The game starts with 100 players dropping out of the battle bus onto an island where you have to collect materials and weapons. You can use these to battle each other, and the last person standing wins. The environment is completely destructible, and you can build things using the materials you collect. You can play the game alone in solo mode, or with your friends in duos and squads. Fortnite is constantly adding new characters and content to the game, with the newest being Season 6 Battle Royale. You can find over 100 new cosmetics in the Season 6 Battle Pass, including brand new pets, so be sure to check it out using my link below. And now, without further ado, let's get started on our squishy hacks. First of all, there are 3 major types of squishies. It's important to know what material you're working with, because some hacks will obviously only work with one type of squishy and not another. The biggest and most popular type are foam-based slow-rising squishies. These are made from polyurethane, which was invented in 1937 by a German chemist called Otto Bayer. In the 80s and 90s, polyurethane foam was used to make stress balls, which then evolved into brightly colored squishies. Then you have super soft silicone squishies, which were created by a Japanese designer called Watabe Manabu. The original squishies are beautifully handmade but difficult to get outside Japan. Almost all the silicone squishies that you can buy very cheaply are mass-produced based on his designs. And lastly, we've got mixed material squishies, which are flexible membranes filled with liquid clay or cornstarch. These became popular as part of the cutting open squishies trend, however there's been at least one case of someone burning their skin due to an unknown liquid inside. Therefore, it's best to just play with these normally instead of cutting them open. I asked for your best squishy tips on Instagram, and a huge thanks to everyone who sent theirs in. If you're not following me yet, then be sure to do so at Macaroon, and you might get to contribute to a future video. One of the most popular suggestions was to leave your squishy in the fridge or freezer to make it more slow rising. I'm going to test this out by putting these 2 pandas in the fridge overnight. I also left one squishy at room temperature, so we can use that as a comparison. So first, there's room temperature and fridge temperature. As you can see, the colder squishy does take a tiny bit longer to rise up. However, it warms up very quickly, especially if you start touching it with your hands. Now we've got room temperature versus freezer temperature, and there's a much more noticeable difference. The frozen squishy feels quite firm and is hard to squeeze, however it does hold its shape well even after being played with for some time. So the conclusion for this hack is that it does work with the freezer, but not the fridge. If your squishy starts losing its scent, then just place it inside a Ziploc bag with a piece of soap or a bath bomb. The longer you leave it, the more smell gets absorbed into the foam, and you can use the product anytime, so you're not going to waste anything. My personal tip is to go for something from Lush, because all of their products are made using essential oils, and I think they smell so much nicer than store-bought soaps. In contrast, if you don't like the smell of your squishy, then just leave it outdoors for a few days. Letting a squishy air out is usually a good idea since most of them come packaged in plastic and chemicals can build up inside. You might have heard about a recent study in Denmark claiming that squishies were dangerous to health. However, that study was only based on the fumes given off by squishies within 1 hour of opening the packaging. If you want to play with your squishy but don't want it to get dirty quickly, then just squish it inside a plastic bag. This also creates extra crunchy ASMR sounds. If your foamy squishies do get dirty, then you can clean them using tape or damp melamine foam. Do not wash them because the water might end up soaking into the foam and it'll turn everything soggy. The best way to clean silicone squishies is with a tiny bit of hand sanitizer or rubbing alcohol. Be sure to avoid any painted areas when you're cleaning because that might rub off the details. The surface of a silicone squishy might feel slightly sticky after cleaning. Simply rub some cornstarch or baby powder all over it and you'll get that silky texture again. Silicone squishies tend to attract dust very quickly, so a final tip is just to buy darker colored ones where any smudges won't show up as easily. If your slow-rising squishies end up ripping, then you can repair the cracks using PVA glue. The first layer might get absorbed into the foam, so be sure to apply another coat until it holds everything together. The glue dries completely transparent, so you don't have to worry about anything coming out. Despite your best efforts, it's often impossible to get a squishy looking super clean again, which is why you might want to reuse them for DIY projects. You can cut one squishy up to make many smaller ones, or paint over the top to create a brand new design. When painting over the squishy, it's important to use a flexible paint. The most popular suggestions were fabric paint, puffy paint, and different combinations of acrylic paint, glue, and shaving foam. So let's test out which one actually works best. I'm applying one coat to each squishy and then leaving them overnight. The first one is plain acrylic paint, which many people said doesn't work for squishies. As you can see, the coverage isn't bad, but it does peel off extremely easily. The second one is fabric paint, and I'm a bit disappointed at how translucent this looks. I think this might just be a bad brand because I've seen people use much thicker paints on their squishies. It is, however, very flexible and scratch resistant, so this is a good choice, but you have to apply several coats. The third one is puffy paint, and this is very similar to the previous one. It's really flexible, but you have to apply several coats to get the coverage you need. Next up, we've got acrylic paint and white glue. This one is very convenient to use, however it's slightly less scratch resistant than fabric or puffy paint. The final one is a mixture of acrylic paint, white glue, and shaving cream. I can see the logic in adding shaving foam since it temporarily makes the paint thicker, but it's actually a type of soap, so this is going to cause your paints to peel off much faster when dry. Therefore, the best things to use when painting squishies are fabric paint, puffy paint, or acrylic paint and white glue. If your squishy is dark, then applying a plain white base coat will help the other colors show up. You can also buy plain white squishies like this, which are great if you just love doing the DIY part. If you want to attach squishies together, then the best option is to sew them using needle and thread. I prefer this method because the thread is very soft, so it won't affect the texture or squishability of your final piece. Using glue is a bit tricky because some types won't stick well to foam or silicone, and even if they do, the glue might feel hard and lumpy after it dries. A very popular method for making squishies from scratch is to use memory foam or sponges. The easiest way to get memory foam is to buy this Rölleka foam pillow from IKEA. Some people might have problems buying a brand new pillow just to cut up, but you have to consider that this only costs $14, which is the same as a box of paints or several tubes of glue. You can remove and save the pillowcase and just open up the inside, and you'll have enough material to make tons of squishies. Simply cut off a small piece and trim it into shape using scissors. Afterwards, just paint over it using fabric paint, puffy paint, or acrylics and white glue. For hygiene reasons, you have to use brand new memory foam when making squishies, so please don't be tempted to cut up an old pillow or mattress that might be covered with sweat and all kinds of other gross things. The closest thing to real squishies are actually earplugs. These are made from polyurethane foam, and you can see that they have an identical slow-rising texture. Sadly, these are too small to feel very satisfying, but they might be useful when making details for other squishy makeovers. Commercial squishies are made by pouring liquid polyurethane into a mold. This is how they get those perfectly smooth shapes, which is obviously impossible to achieve by cutting up foam. You can replicate this method yourself, however it's a bit more expensive and complicated compared to other squishy techniques. If you want to see more ways of making DIY squishies, then be sure to check out this video here. To make a slow-rising squishy from scratch, you'll need a 2-part polyurethane solution and a silicone mold. I'm going to be using foamy Hitohada Gel, but you can also get generic polyurethane liquid, which is quite a bit cheaper. This is used for insulation, casting, or sculpture work, and you can normally find them in hardware shops, art shops, or on Amazon. Be sure to take correct safety precautions when making liquid squishy projects. This involves wearing rubber gloves to prevent any chemicals coming in contact with your skin and keeping the room well ventilated. I also find that the liquids tend to spill very easily, so keep lots of tissues nearby to clean things up. The ratio for making foamy squishies with Hitohada Gel is 64:100, and these bottles are already pre-filled with that same amount. The easiest method is just to mix both bottles together. However, if you don't want to use up everything at once, then just measure out exactly 1/2 or 1/4 of the liquid. Be sure to use kitchen skills when working with any type of Hitohada Gel. Even if you know you only want to use half the bottle, you have to measure it out to the exact gram instead of eyeballing it. In this case, I'm using 32 grams of base polyurethane and 50 grams of hardener. If you're using liquid polyurethane, then be sure to use a much larger container or cup when mixing. The mixture will start expanding to over 6 times its original size. This took me by complete surprise here, since I didn't expect it to happen this quickly, and I was lucky that I just managed to catch it without spilling anything. Because of the expansion, it's best to stick with simple shapes for DIY foamy squishies. Things like bread buns or cupcakes are great, since those still look realistic even when the edges aren't perfectly even. Now just leave the molds to cure overnight. Making squishies requires a lot of patience, since there's often quite a bit of waiting to do. Depending on what type of Hitohada Gel you choose, it might take up to a week before the final piece is ready to be taken out. To help you pass the time, why not play some Fortnite, which you can get for free by clicking the link just below this video. So this is how the squishies look after curing, and interestingly enough, the smaller ones were squishier than the larger ones. These aren't super slow rising like store-bought squishies, but they're still quite impressive for a homemade piece. If you want to make colored foamy squishies, then be sure to add pigment after you measure out the first liquid. As soon as you add the second liquid, the mixture will start expanding and you won't have time to mix anything inside. Here you can see some nice ideas for making colorful cupcake squishies. The second type of squishy you can make from scratch are silicone textured ones. These are created using milky or transparent Hitohada Gel, and you've probably seen them in my other videos. This is a special type of resin, and depending on how much hardener you put inside, it will end up with exactly the same texture as silicone. This Bongo Cat squishy tutorial is coming in my next video, so be sure to subscribe now so you don't miss out. For any type of DIY liquid squishy, you can use store-bought molds or make your own. This is where things get fun because you've got complete control over the final design. Simply make whatever you want using polymer clay and then use that to create a mold. Hitohada Gel works with molds created from 2-part silicone putty or a thermoelastic plastic like Oyumaru. Do not use liquid or powder pigments with Hitohada Gel because this can have unpredictable effects on the curing process. The best way to add color is using this oil-based ink, which was created especially for coloring squishies. When making transparent squishies, be sure to use color extremely sparingly. You literally only need a tiny toothpick-sized dot to give your whole mixture a nice tint. I decided to remake my octopus squishy from this video, and it turned out so much better. Paint on details using acrylic paint mixed with glue or fabric paint. Though please note that paint doesn't stick quite as well to these silicone texture squishies compared to foamy ones, so it's best to only add small things such as facial features. And of course, try to avoid rubbing any painted areas when you're playing with these. Last but not least, always keep squishies away from babies, small children, and pets. Many squishies look and smell edible, so even if the toy itself is large, chunks of foam can easily get bitten off. Silicone squishies can be mistaken for gummy candy, so you definitely don't want to expose anyone to a choking hazard. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and please feel free to share any more squishy tips in the comment section below. And of course, if you want to join the Fortnite hype, then just click the link below this video to get started. I'm Joanna, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!